The next talk is something I'm quite interested, which is building up some interesting people like called DBAs from your own materials. And Dave is going to be talking about this one. So let's start. Thank you.
Especially for that.
Yeah,
make sure you thank this gentleman, all the other volunteers who are running Scale. They don't get paid for this, and they sacrifice a lot. And a simple thank you doesn't seem like it goes a long way, but it does. So please thank them. Yeah. Okay. About a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, I left Oracle, where I was a community manager for MySQL. Now, before I was a community manager for MySQL, I was the certification manager. So if you have a certification as a DBA or a developer, you might have a piece of paper with a signature that's almost like mine, but not quite. Now, when I was the certification manager for MySQL AB, later Sun Microsystems, and then Oracle for a short period of time, I would talk to a lot of hiring managers. And they would say, I have a hard time finding a MySQL DBA. I'm having an impossible time finding a Postgres DBA. So, I started working for Percona a little bit over a year ago, and one of my goals is to make sure there's a lot more well-qualified Postgres DBAs out there. Now, taking someone who's a developer or some other technical job and making him a DBA is a tough chore. Taking someone who's a MySQL DBA and turning him into a Postgres DBA is a little bit easier. Now, I've been doing a series of blogs and videos on Postgres skills for MySQL DBAs that have been fairly well received. And I'm going to ask for your help today, because if you have trained someone or you've switched over yourself from MySQL or from another database, what were your sticking points? What were your pain points? What went easy? What didn't? Because I'm going to be delivering several talks on this subject this year and in the future. So the idea is that you have a MySQL DBA and you transpose them from MySQL over to Postgres. By the way, if you don't know what a make or buy decision is, I'm probably the only person in the room who's dumb enough to have an MBA. But the idea is you need something. And you can either go buy it for X amount of dollars down in the corner at the store, or you can make it for yourself at Y dollars. And whichever's cheaper, you tend to pick that as your choice. So, first question I get from a lot of folks, especially in the Postgres world, is how do you recognize MySQL DBAs? Well, you'll find out tomorrow at the MySQL track, which is down in room C. First hints are clothing and coffee cups. You'll see them, they're very well natally dressed, mainly in T-shirts. And there's a wide variety of T-shirts you'll see out there. Coffee cups, with a Starbucks, you usually don't see these, but you'll find them around the office. And there's a wide variety of them. So once you find yourself a MySQL DBA, you're going to have to start talking to them. Oops, let me see if I can. Well, Postgres and MySQL had differences. This young man had a question, what's the difference between the two? Well, they have a lot in common. They're both created by a gentleman named Michael, who rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. They're both relational database management systems. Open source, thank goodness. Both are very popular, and they're both technically old enough allowed to drink. Now, Postgres has better SQL standard support. It's governed by a mailing list and consensus, and it has a very active community. Now, MySQL is seen as easier in a lot of ways. We'll cover that later. It's governed by Oracle. Oracle has really cleaned up the MySQL code base and software engineering process a whole lot. And it also has an active community. Now, the devil is in the details. So congratulations, you found a MySQL DBA, and you tell them that, you know, hey, this would be great for your career, and you'd like to have them start learning Postgres. Now, you're going to have to tell them that they're going to have better skills, that they're going to get a lot of cross-training, enhanced job opportunities, and the ability to now complain about 2 databases rather than just 1. So where do you start? Well, you have to point out that you have different approaches to the same problem. The other thing is the tooling is different. But the basics are pretty much the same. You basically want someone who's anal retentive about data. You're going to want them to be able to do backups and restores. Account administration isn't that different. Performance tuning can be a lot different, but it's basically the same concept. You know, the more memory you have, the better things run. Query tuning can be different just because Postgres has so many extra little switches and knobs to adjust. Now, the great thing about Postgres is there's a lot of really neat things out there that will attract the attention of a MySQLer. It has 2 JSON data types. That merge function is an amazing thing. Indexes galore, and a couple other stuff you've probably heard today. And then you have what I call the OMGHDWSHTP 2023 stuff, and we'll go into that later. And that's basically, oh my goodness, do we still have this problem in 2023? I see a couple heads shaking there. Okay, first thing to do, start with an installation. Find them an old computer, put on the Linux distro of their choice, or possibly Windows, have them install the server, get it running, have them get into Postgres as the Postgres user, and create a super user account. And I like to use the DVD rental database load. Database example from the Postgres PostgreStutorial.com. Why? Well, that DVD rental database is very similar to one that's been used in the Postgres community for 20 years. So, first steps, get them to log into Postgres, create the DVD rental schema, and then have them load the data. That may not seem like a hard example, but for a lot of folks who know only one database, that's a non-trivial step. So still logged in as user Postgres, have them create a super user. Why a super user? Well, it's going to get rid of a lot of the stuff playing I forget the name of the file that controls access, but you give them basically God privilege. And if they are a trained DBA, they're used to restoring stuff. And by the way, you learn how to really be a good DBA by wiping things out and having to start over again and then learning not to do that. So back in the user account you just created, have them run PSQL and have them get into the DVD rental. Now, the Scala database has been used in MySQL for about 20 years, and it's well documented. There's lots of exams written around it, lots of blogs and all that. And this DVD rental database is very similar. You've given them a common ground. They'll be able to go out there and use it like they're used to with the Scala database and find out what's going on there. Now, the /d commands are brand new to the MySQLers. There is no show create table. So if you do show create table actor, you're going to get this message saying, you know, syntax error, add or near create. But if you do /d actor, it gives them the information they want. Now, it's not in the format they're used to, and you'll have to sit down with them and explain to them what this next val actor ID sequence is. But the raw material is there. They now know what to look for the structure of the table. Have them do a couple simple queries. That's going to work just like it will in almost any other database. Have them do a simple backup. I recommend PGDump because it's kind of the nearest equivalent to MySQL dump. Works fairly similar and very quickly. Explain to them what the arguments are, the name of the program, the name of the database, and that you're piping it to a file. Very exactly the same as what they do in MySQL dump. Now, I have them do a restore to a separate schema. In this case, we're creating a database called new DVD, and then have them restore the backup to that. Very simple first steps. Remember, they're a little nervous what's going out there. But by now, they know they can create a database, they can load data, they can make backups, they can restore it. Next thing is you'll want to give them a cheat sheet like this with the various top-level commands. By the way, these slides are, I'll give you the URL where to get them later. Now, the other thing is, in the details, MySQL DBAs are used to creating tables with auto increment. Now, it also, Postgres world, you use serial, or you do some sort of way to get a sequence. Now, you're going to have to explain to them that there is a serial data type that is used in place of auto increment. MySQL also has a serial data type, but it's defined as big int, unsigned, not null, auto increment, unique. By the way, if they are used to doing that and they're used to assigning it as a primary key, they've added 2 indexes on that one column, which is not efficient. So, start sneaking in sequences. In this example here, created a table, and we've used a serial data type. And when they do the /d on this table, they're going to see that the default value is the next value, the table name, the column name, sequence. Break down the steps. Have them do inserts. Now, in this example, we have the 2 extraneous columns, the Y and the Z, that are car 20s. And in this case, we show them that they've inserted 2 records, and X has automatically been auto-incremented. Very simple stuff, but show them the basics. By the way, that insert 02, they're not used to seeing an OID, so you might have to handhold them through that. Okay, table of secrets created by create table. Now, if they do a /d, they can get a list of what's out there. In this case, they see that we have a table and we have a sequence. They're both in the public schema and the names for them. Now, basic sequences, they don't have sequences in MySQL. So if you want to start a sequence and they've never seen one before, you can tell them you also have offset numbers. Also teach them how to use nextval. This is something they're not used to. By the way, I like inserting data when you name explicitly every column in the table. Why? Because eventually what happens is someone comes in, they're doing a quick and dirty, they do a cut and paste, and that one column that you didn't include gets excluded from something where it's needed badly. Okay. Here we're going to create a table, and we're going to generate a series, and it goes out, in this case, goes out and creates all 100 records, something they're not used to doing in MySQL. By the way, tell them this is a good way to create test data. Wrapping sequences. This is something that will blow away a MySQL DBA's mind. In this case, we're going to have a sequence called wrap sequence. It's going to be an integer, minimum value of 1, maximum value of 2. Why are we doing this? Well, we want to be able to flip between 1 and 2, 1 and 2 for our index here. Maybe you have a carton of goods that's shipped in 2 parts. Maybe you have some other thing that fits the scenario. But to show them that you could actually set the starting value and end value and then have them wrap makes it very exciting for a lot of projects. Okay, sequences. If they want to know the details on sequences, the /d and then the name of the sequence will tell them the minimum and the maximum, how they increment, and if it cycles or not. If they want to see a list of sequences, /ds. Okay, explain. Explain is a lot different in Postgres versus MySQL. Not that much different, but it takes a little bit of getting used to. In MySQL, you type in explain and the query, and it gives you the information, tables you're using, partitions, possible keys, key length, number of rows to read, and in this case, we're using a file sort because we're ordering it by name. And the bottom line there, where it starts with note code 1003, that's actually the query plan. So let's create 2 tables. Both are series of 1 to 100,000. One has an index, one doesn't have an index. So when you run explain on the first query, the first thing that's going to blow their mind is that the cost. There's two costs. The startup costs, which is before you actually run the query, what else stuff has to be assembled before that, and then the execution cost. As you can see here, T1 has an index, T2 doesn't, well, this T2 has an index, this one doesn't have an index, and the costs are different. So when you're training a new MySQL DBA in the ways of Postgres, you got to teach them what to look for. Also, explain analyzed was just added to MySQL about 2 years ago. So explain to them that this is the actual cost of the query instead of the estimated cost is a big thing. By the way, putting the options and parents is also something that MySQL does not do. And by the way, MySQL does not have the option for YAML or XML output. So, learning to read the output of explain. Teaching debugging is harder than teaching programming. I don't know if anyone else has found that to be true, but it takes a lot of intuitive problem solving that a lot of folks do not have. Now, in this example, we're explaining, selecting the title, first name, last name from a film table. We're doing an inner join to another table and another join on a third table. Teaching how these things cascade, first table, second table, third table, is very important. They're not used to this format, and they're also, once again, they have the cost differentials that they haven't seen before. So walking them through explain takes a little bit of effort. Connections. MySQL has a series of threads. Postgres needs to fork a new process every time there's a new connection. There are connection poolers available, but by default are not there, which means that connections to MySQL are a lot cheaper than they are under Postgres. This can be confusing to someone who is not used to looking for that. So if you're using a connection pooler, be sure to point that out. Okay, this is the stuff that the MySQL DBA is going to look at and going, oh my God, we still have this problem. Vacuum. How many people have been bit by Autovehicle or vacuum? Okay. MySQL does a lot of the garbage collection. I shouldn't call it garbage collection, but the way they use MVCC is you don't have to worry about that. It automatically takes care of the dead tuples for you. Postgres leaves those around. Now, the problem comes in that if you're not used to that, suddenly the database is full. What happened? So you have to teach them not only to vacuum tables every so often, but the intricacies of auto vacuum. So have them read through the documentation on auto vacuum and vacuum. Now, for a non-busy site, this may not be a problem. For a very busy site, you know how it could be crazy. Now, vacuum has to process each table on a regular basis for several reasons. Trying to recover disk space, update statistics, update the visibility map. By the way, MySQL doesn't have a visibility map that you can actually access. And to prevent transaction ID wraparound. Transaction ID wraparound is also something you don't see in the MySQL world, so that's something else you have to warn a new DBA about. So, give an example of that. Create a table, 2 columns, both integers. Insert a record, insert 3 more records, and have them go out there and check the number of dead tuples. So we've had 1 record that we've overwritten 3 times, 3 dead tuples. Now, as I mentioned before, MySQL automatically takes care of that. By the way, they implemented MVCC. Postgres doesn't have that, so you have to be aware of that. Vacuum is very simple. Tell them to vacuum foo, and away the dead tuples go. Visibility map. Now, once again, MySQL does not have this so much. This is something to teach them to be aware of. As junior DBAs to intermediate DBAs are not going to be using this much, but have them be aware of it. This is a potential pothole that you want to have them avoid. Wraparound xides. Has anyone had a wraparound in this room? Were you able to get the data back, or was it all gone? Okay, and were you able to recover? Okay. So
we were able to recover them for him. It was, thankfully they caught it and they didn't. If you keep trying to restart the database when it shuts down and keep trying to run the application, you will lose data. If you don't do that, you won't. You just need to shut the database down, run a vacuum,
okay.
and bring it back up, and everything's fine, back to normal.
Well, yeah. the two key things there is you need to run vacuum, and also the database will shut down. Yeah. Now, as you mentioned, if you keep restarting, what happens is it writes these records over your old data, and your old data is there, but technically you can't reach it without a lot of miracle workers. So, something, again, that MySQL doesn't do. Caveats. Vacuum can shoot you in the foot. If you have a lot of long-running transactions or other things fooling with the tables, it may not do what you want. Also, if you use a vacuum full, it's going to lock tables on you. So if it's an emergency situation and you're in vacuum full and suddenly the phone starts ringing because none of your customers can do what they need to do, you're going to get complaints. Auto vacuum. Auto vacuum is usually turned on by default in the last couple of versions. It's great. If it works wonderfully. If it doesn't work, it works miserably for you. Easy way to tell someone how it's running is do show auto vacuum and it should report back on. Also, don't forget you can use these commands here to go out and clean up dead tuples and redo indexes. Now, MySQL DBAs aren't used to this. They're used to running analyze on a table. Fairly inexpensive. That's the way it goes. Transaction ID wraparound. As I mentioned, Postgres uses 32 bits. That's not enough. MySQL has a big int you can use, unsigned big int, which I forget how big that can be. But you don't normally run to wraparound on several quadrillion numbers. Now, if you teach these new DBAs that the xides is basically a circular buffer, and if you run out of available ones, you're going to be in trouble. Things are going to shut down. You're going to have to rebuild. And once again, if you get in trouble, the database is going to stop, and you're going to have trouble restarting it. You probably won't know why it stopped. Yes, sir?
I think Autovehicle won't let you to hit that number. So, as far as I remember, Autovehicle is going to kick, even if it's off. Autovehicle is going to start cleaning up everything in every 20 million transactions or so. Okay. So we should not be reaching the 1 million limits ever, but should not be.
Should not be reaching, yeah. And we don't need many more than 640K of memory to program in, if you remember all that. Yeah. Okay, toast. This is one of the concepts that people who are new to Postgres, who are not DBAs, freak out about. MySQL and other DBAs read this and go, oh, this is how you get past the standard block size. So toast is something to explain once, and they're going to understand it. Teach roles. MySQL has roles for a couple of years, but they're not that popular. One of the biggest problems I see facing customers is that someone new comes in, and they say, okay, they're taking over Bill's slot. I'm just going to take Bill's account information, copy it over to this new person, and everything's going to be hunky-dory until they start deleting tables or they have access to things they shouldn't have access to. So start off your new DBAs right, have them read up on roles and how to use them. It will save you time and pain later. Wow factor. These are the things where MySQL DBAs are going to they're going to be impressed and their jaw's going to drop on the floor and they're going to say, oh my God, I need that. Materialized views. There is a way to do materialized views in MySQL. It takes some third-party software, and it's kind of fussy. And every time it upgrades dot release, it stops working. But materialized views for MySQL DBA is a big thing. The watch command in PSQL is really handy. The many types of indexes. I wish Christoph would have done his rant on gin indexes. I wanted to hear that. MySQL, you basically have one type of index, and that's it. Well, you have functional indexes, but for generally tables, you're going to see one type of index, period. Postgres has an embarrassing rich environment for indexes. And even one of them you can actually make other indexes out of, so big deal there. Also, this example here, filtering is a thing that I wish I had in MySQL. This is a thing that looks very simple, but it can save you a lot of processing. So, the stuff that is kind of, you're going to have to reassure your MySQL DBAs about. Replication. This is fairly easy to do in MySQL. Over different data centers, over a wide geographical situation, highly available, real easy to set up. Each one of those clusters probably takes about 30 commands to set up, and it runs very reliably. Back 25 years ago, I was running a Postgres site that I moved over to MySQL because I needed replication. At the time, Postgres, I think it was 7 or 8, you did replication with triggers, and it didn't always work. So replication is one of the things you're going to have to tell them is there's nothing equivalent to InnoDB cluster or even Galera. Connection pooling. Now, as I mentioned earlier, MySQL has a bunch of little threads sitting around waiting for connections. Postgres doesn't do that unless you use a connection pooler. Okay, I have some recommended reading that I think that anyone starting off with Postgres should go through. Number 4 on there is the Postgres docs. I have found these very well written and very thorough. Occasionally, other databases I go through, there are problems reading the docs. The Postgres stuff is outstanding. I recommend going out to Scaling Postgres and getting on their weekly newsletter. That is invaluable to me. There's a lot of stuff that I run across there that I've never heard of before. And once again, when you have a new DBA and they're learning a new database, tell them it's different. And different isn't always better, and it isn't always worse. It's just different. So this is where I get to beg you. I'm going to be teaching this a lot. So what in your experience has helped and what hasn't? We have a gentleman over here.
So you've talked a lot about things like Autovacuum and some of the performance differences.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that comes to my mind, especially if you're dealing with somebody that's a little more, at least a little more than a junior DBA, is that it's probably really helpful to describe the storage strategies and their differences at that point, because suddenly Autovacuum is going to make a lot more sense why we have it. As well as the whole transaction ID wraparound problem, because since my InnoDB at least is using index-oriented tables, right, with rollback segments and things like that, the scope of problems that you have are just different, and understanding the storage layers can make a big difference in the clarity of the issues, I think, in the minds of crossing over DBAs, and that goes for other databases too, not just MySQL.
Okay. Anything in particular in the storage strategy?
So the basic thing is you're starting off with the fact that these are heap tables. They are unordered. We don't, that the indexes actually point at the direct tuples. So consequently, if you have billions of secondary indexes on MySQL, that doesn't pose the same performance issues that as if you have billions of secondary indexes on Postgres. A second point is that since these are, again, unordered things, we handle MVCC by leaving the row in place, while MySQL updates it in place and writes the old value to this undo segment. And as I say, explaining those differences makes, for example, yeah, Autovehicle is garbage collection. You know, it makes the whole garbage collection problem different.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Okay.
Just going back to the serial stuff, it's a little bit more recently, but Postgres has the identity feature instead of the, it's kind of like in the SQL standard. There's kind of a problem with the serial stuff in Postgres in that you actually have to manage the permissions of the sequence independently of the table. Even if you give it a serial type, the permissions are still not there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you use the identity feature, that like ties the sequence to the table and you don't have to manage the permissions separately.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so I was walking a coworker through setting up a MySQL replica last week, and I was reminded, to what you were asking about, how using PG base backup is like a two-step process versus MySQL's replica instantiation.
Yeah. Well, what sort of replication were they using? Were they using an ODB cluster or simple two-node or?
An ODB cluster, I believe.
An ODB cluster, okay. Yes, sir. Hold on.
Is there an industry standard performance monitoring solution for Postgres DBAs that a MySQL DBA should be aware of if they move to that?
Industry standard? No.
Okay.
What I'd like to recommend is Percona's monitoring and management. It is a tool that you monitor your Mongo, MySQL, Maria, or Postgres instances. It's free, it's open source. It will show you what your cache hits are, look at what queries are doing. It will alert you when certain thresholds are hit. It has some advisors that will come through and say, hey, you might want to move this buffer setting from here to there. But it's not an industry standard yet. Yes, sir.
I would throw in it also has some host OS monitoring.
Yeah. It also has some host OS monitors and goodies. So it's free, it's open source, and it does a wonderful job. PMM, Percona Monitoring and Management. Come by our booth tomorrow and we'll give you a free demo.
Where did you get the shirt?
Are
they going to give them out?
Well, the big trouble with this shirt is it has our old logo on it. I'm not sure what shirts we're handing out tomorrow.
They're fairly boring right now because we just changed the logo.
Yeah, we just changed our logo from what you see here, and you'll see it on the ending slide. But we'll have some T-shirts tomorrow.
You don't have a spare one for me?
By the way, if this is your first scale, this is an amazing swag show, but people who give out things like T-shirts, they tend to evaporate in the first day. So if you're down there when the show floor opens, that's the time to get the shirts. And we only have a limited number, so.
We have about 200 shirts, and they're expecting 2,500 people.
Let's give you the context, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's give you the context, please. Thank you.
I'm actually a MySQL DBA from long ago who transitioned to Postgres. And I used to criticize how Postgres replication wasn't as polished as MySQL when you could do blue-green deployments or database upgrades. But I found that now with logical replication, you can do a lot of the same type of work. The big thing that I discovered when transitioning was you could make DDL changes with minimal impact, unlike DB tables. I know there's other tools out there, and maybe MySQL has gotten a lot better in the last few years.
Yeah, MySQL has worked very hard to make transactional DDL a reality. In some cases, it's close. Other places, they've done it. In a few other places, it's still waiting.
Yeah, just tagging on that last point, it is interesting that Oracle managed to get MySQL to have transactional DDL, but not Oracle. But I have a question for you. Do you have any advice in trying to look for what to if you're trying to hire MySQL DBAs in order to transition them over to Postgres, what to look for in such a DBA in the hiring process?
I tend to look for people who are curious, they're interested in learning something new, and they realize that if they don't back it up and then delete it, it's gone. That sounds like a simple step, but I talk to thousands of people every year who complain about, I couldn't believe this person didn't back up the data, or I couldn't believe they reformatted the disk with their only set of data on it. And it's like, yeah, that's two problems there. So, anyone else who's converted from MySQL to Postgres or from SQL Server or some other database? Well, if not, I'd like to invite you all to Percona Live. We're finalizing our speakers, and it's going to be in Denver, May 22nd to 24th. We'll have some more information at our booth about it. And with that, if... Uh-huh.
I haven't used MySQL for ages. Is the ability to use plugins, is that something you discuss with DBAs, like if you're using PL Python or something like that on PostgreSQL? Is that a new feature for MySQL people, or is it something they also have to support?
MySQL has had plugins for 10, 12 years at least. Postgres has had extensions for a long time. Logically, they're very similar. So hopefully if you have someone who's used to one, they can adapt to the other.
Okay, great.
And if there's any exceptions to that, please let me know, folks. And once again, stop by our booth. We're number 224.
Actually, I'm sorry, based on this topic, I'm a RPM packager for Postgres. So I think we have more than a few hundred, like 500 extensions around there. So you can just at least use them package in 150 of them, at least. So yeah.
Yeah. And one final piece of advice, if you are using extensions and you have a new DBA, teach them what the extensions are and what they do. Because you're off on vacation in Maui, you're surfing, dude, and they call you up and say, hey, how come this isn't running? It's because you didn't load this extension. So make sure they know what the extensions are.
Any other questions?
Once again, make sure you thank all the volunteers. And by
Thank you.
By the way, if this is your first scale, you're in for an amazing ride over the next couple days, and you have access to some of the best brains in the computer industry. Excluding mine, naturally, but
thank you.
Thank you.
So the next set of talks is going to start in 20 minutes in this room and the next room. Again, I want to remind you that there's a Postgres Ask Me Anything session at 4:30 in this room. And also people from the community will be here, so you can ask any questions. So that's what I've been told, like ask me anything. So please come here, and if you have any questions, just ask us. Thank you.